avoid
Understand.
as much time without
Understand.
mask as I can. That's all. Just to inform you, I will not have the mask on when
Yes, ma'am.
we debate.
Well, given the numbers that we're seeing, I wouldn't blame you if you kept the mask on the whole time. So,
Prudence is good. Good evening, Mrs. Dudsack.
So, hi, Paul. You look
Hey,
so nice.
I just, because I don't want them buzzing through the whole thing.
Hi, Janet. How are you tonight?
How are you?
Good.
Nice to meet
Super.
you.
Huh?
Yeah.
It doesn't,
Again,
no, just put it down. It won't bother me
I
over
guess
that.
that's Ms. Reding. Hi, nice to meet you.
Hi, good to see you.
Well, it's not New York, New Jersey.
Oh, great. From far away. What time is it now?
It is almost 12 p.m. Lunchtime here,
Lunchtime.
which
Lunchtime.
really works
Yeah.
very, very
we are
well.
standing in between you and lunch.
Yeah.
Yes, that's
Sorry for
okay.
this.
No, I'll have a nice cup of tea instead, which is
Oh,
great.
great.
Mrs. Reding, Tony used to be in Luxembourg as the president of the American Women's Club when her husband was here as the head of Citibank. And then she came to work at me in AMCHAM, and then I lost her
Take
when he
this away.
transferred. So now she is the directress for LACCNY NYC in New York City, and works with Janet Merlo, who is also on the screen as well. And we're very happy that we have such a nice collaboration, all of us together.
Hopefully, Ms. Redding knows what LACC stands for. It's Luxembourg American Chamber of Commerce in New York.
In New York, yeah.
Right. So, which it's nice to have that collaboration with Luxembourg all the time. You
Yeah.
know? We really
Yeah,
love that.
that's great. And it's a long-term engagement, and which is working very well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Really,
Agreed.
I only hear positive echoes
thank you.
from these organizations and the collaboration we have on economic affairs.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. We're trying our best. We're really trying. So, and it's nice for Ambassador Evans to do this again for us. We really appreciate it, Ambassador.
Well, I look forward to it.
Well, we have a good turnout, so which is great, 103 people. So
Yeah.
that is amazing. So I think also Ambassador Strunk is joining us today.
He's guest online. Good evening, Ambassador Strunk.
Ambassador Strunk needs to adjust a bit his camera.
Ambassador Strunk, your camera is showing you on the side instead of, that's better. No, yep, that's
Yeah,
good.
we're good.
We were wondering how you did that.
Okay.
Good evening, Katerina.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Do you think how are we doing? How many have we got?
Only have
We got
35.
35.
Okay, let's wait a little while longer.
Yes. And how is the weather in Luxembourg? You could tell me about the weather because we're expecting a storm, a snowstorm.
Yeah, you're expecting a big storm. We're just expecting the normal cold rain that we get this time of year every day.
Yes, that's for sure. I remember those days, but you know,
Yeah, they are not the most glorious ones. We have one day without rain and one day with rain. So not
Well, if you-
used too much to the without rain.
If you really want to know, Tony, they announced for Christmas plus 10 degrees.
wow. Okay.
So it's not gonna look like a white Christmas over here, unfortunately.
Well, I'm excited to this will be our really first snowstorm in the US. Today is very, very cold. So it's like 34 degrees. So that's what by you? I'm trying to think. Fahrenheit. It's like what, minus? Yeah, it's minus 10.
You know, the thing about the cold in New York, because I remember when I lived in New York, is because of the tall buildings. When it gets cold and you have the wind that's coming down between the tall buildings, it's frigid.
Yes, yes. Well, yeah. Okay, so how we're doing with numbers? Okay, getting there. 41, 42. So are you guys still on lockdown, correct?
Yes. at
Different-
least until
15th of January.
15th of January. And there is some discussion of perhaps it extending beyond that as well.
Yeah, well, it's, New York has different than New Jersey. It's unfortunately a little bit chaotic. Different parts is a little bit, you know, but unfortunately our numbers are really going up, and it's this time I see a lot of more of people that I know that are getting sick, which is
So,
scary. Yeah. We have some friends that are doctors, and right now they both have COVID, which that's very, very scary, you know. So, and my son, as you know, is in Boston, just finished his university, and, you know, they're exposed by friends or whatever. So it makes it very scary, you know. And, but this is life, and let's hope that it's going to get better with the vaccine in 6 months or so. And hope for 2021 to be a great year, better anyway than 2020. But we are still very lucky. We are the lucky ones. So okay, I just want
2 more minutes and then we'll start.
Yeah, well, we'll just have to play with those who are there. And then as we move on, I guess they'll move in.
We will give 1 more minute and then we'll start. We'll have other people joining. But if they're joining while I'm saying something, it doesn't matter. The important thing is that
Hi, Nicholas, how are you?
Hello, I'm fine. How are you?
Good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
Let me maybe remind one thing to everybody, to please mute your microphones when the event will start.
other than the speakers, of course.
Apart from Ambassador Evans, Mrs. Reding, and Paul, of course. This event will be recorded, but the chat room is deactivated. So that means you cannot place any questions and expect answers. It's only an interactive event between the panel members. Thank you.
Nicholas, of course, you'll need to
You'll have to go
come online when we get to the end so that you can say a few
or
words.
close
too.
those two doors.
Hi, Casey, how are you?
Absolutely.
Hi there, great. Glad to be with us.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah. Shall
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and start. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining AMCHAM and LACC NYC with the support of Delano to go ahead and to put on this Zoom discussion tonight, which we consider very timely. We are talking about the US-Luxembourg relationship. Where are we at and where are we going? And I think, as many of you all know from your personal experience, there are very strong ties between the United States and Luxembourg. Because of immigration, there are likely as many or more people of Luxembourg heritage living in the United States now as there are living in Luxembourg because of 19th century immigration and other immigration since then. Following the liberation of Luxembourg in the Second World War by General Patton, during the era of the Marshall Plan, the US significantly assisted Luxembourg with the reindustrialization and the rebuilding of the economy by bringing over Goodyear and DuPont and other large US manufacturers. This was followed in somewhat later years by the finance industry, building on the strength of the Luxembourg banking industry to establish itself here. And these, just as the manufacturing companies have stayed, so the financial industry companies from the US have stayed and have grown as well. An online commercial activity was established by AOL a number of years ago and has since grown along with the rest of the IT sector with very strong US ties. And now we are starting to talk and to develop sectors related to space. both with the signing of a US a Luxembourg treaty regarding space, and now very recently the invitation to Luxembourg, which has been accepted for Luxembourg to join the Artemis Accord and the Artemis project with the US and a few other countries for further development of space. So we have had long, historic, and deep ties for quite a number of years. It goes from the 5,001 American soldiers interned at Ham Cemetery with General Patton, through the ties that we have as both members of the NATO alliance, through strong economic bilateral investments and economic activities, and to cultural and family links as well. These strong ties have stood us well for many years and have been further strengthened and developed during the last several years, even though there has been some tensions that have been created at senior political levels during the past several years. I have to particularly compliment Ambassador Evans and his team for the fact that during their tenure here, they have ensured that a backlog of bilateral agreements between the United States and Luxembourg that had been not being addressed for quite some time have all been cleaned up and have all been signed and all taken care of. That has taken an enormous amount of work, and I think it's something that is very, very helpful to the business community and helpful in other ways as well. So we are now in an era where, as of last night, we have made a decision and the Electoral College has picked a new US president who will be inaugurated on the 20th of January. And therefore, it's indeed appropriate for us to talk about and do a little bit of a review of where are we at and where are we going as we move forward into the future, hopefully building on the strength of this very strong and wonderful relationship that we have had. I thank LACCNY for their partnership with us for quite some time and for the further strengthening of that partnership over the past year. I thank Delano for going ahead and joining us to help promote this event tonight. I thank my colleagues at AMCHAM EU for going ahead and promoting this through the AMCHAM network within Europe. And I'm excited by the quality of the people that we have in the audience, and certainly deeply appreciative and very thankful for having Ambassador Evans and for having Madam Reding with us tonight to go ahead and talk with us. I think the best thing to do is we have a full agenda. If it goes according to plan, it will last for 74 minutes, but we'll see. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a keynote address by Mrs. Reding and then by Ambassador Evans, and then we will switch back and forth between one question lead to one person with the other person having an opportunity to add comments at the end, but we'll switch the questions back and forth. And then at the end, we'll have Mrs. Reding asking Ambassador Evans one question of her own choice, and Ambassador Evans asking Mrs. Reding one question of her choice. This then will be followed by a finishing keynote address by Casey Mace, who is a Deputy Chief of Mission of the US, and by remarks from Nicholas representing LACCNY. And then I will wish you all a very Merry Christmas, a very Happy Hanukkah, and a very successful holiday season and New Year. So with that in mind, we are so fortunate to have such powerful and strong speakers tonight that they don't need any introduction. So I will simply move on and go ahead and offer the microphone to Mrs. Reding to give a 5-minute keynote welcome. Madam Reding.
Well, thank you very much for your introduction, and you have said it all. Luxembourg and the United States is a long-lasting love story. And even the changing politics here and there cannot change it, and cannot make it look worse than the beauty that it has. So first, I would like to thank Ambassador Evans, because it is true that during his tenure, he has managed to get rid of the backlog of bilateral agreements, and that is absolutely important for our economic and commercial communities in the United States and in Luxembourg. And they are working and they are feeling at ease. Whoever is in power, whoever is doing political business, be it in the United States, be it in Luxembourg. But Luxembourg cannot define itself as an island. Luxembourg is at the heart of the European Union. It is part of it, and it lives out of this very strong union. It can sit on the table. And I must say that when I speak about we, I mean we Europeans, because I cannot define myself as a Luxembourger without defining myself as a European. And I say that we are very relieved today because yesterday, as Paul said, the Electoral College formalized the outcome of the recent presidential elections. Now, after years of uncertainty, that means for Europe, the hope that the relations go back to normal, the political relations, the economic relations, and that means for Europe also that the transatlantic cooperation, which you know is built on shared history, shared values, shared interests, on mutual respect and in mutual trust, and it has suffered during the last years, and now we can rebuild. Now, how is this rebuilding going to look like? To my humble opinion, we know that the new president will certainly first concentrate on internal affairs, trying to overcome the split, the division in his society. And we also know that Europe has changed during the experience of the last years. We have understood that we have to rely mainly on ourselves and become much more self-assertive. And the concept of European sovereignty was created during the last months. Now, I must make it clear from the beginning on, that does not mean protectionism. That means building on the strength and on the capacity to act. It doesn't mean disengagement. It means empowerment and collaboration with friends and allies. And I believe that this is very good for the future transatlantic partnership, because the stronger the partners are, the best they can mutually reinforce themselves. Now, between the United States, representing roughly 1/4 of the worldwide GDP, and the growing Asia, representing 1/3 of the global wealth, I believe that in the very near and in the further future, Europe has certainly an equilibrative role to play. So I foresee for the next years these three partners, unequal, not with the same mentality, but two of them who share the same values and the same historical past should come together. So before we can speak about the new game of the three powers in geopolitics, I think we have to tackle our bilateral relations and do our homework and do it very quickly. And that's why I was very glad to see the hands which was reached out by the European Commission with the new EU-US agenda for global change. Now, I think in this agenda, everything we need to do, we as Europeans, and of course that includes Luxembourgians who will play a very constructive and problem-solving role in this procedure. The first one is to build a transatlantic green trade agenda. So back to the Paris Agreement and preparing together with America the Glasgow agreement to come. The second element is to relaunch multilateralism. The reform of the WTO is pending. And Europe cannot do that alone. We have to do it together with the United States. And we have to bring the appellate body back to function. You know, it couldn't function anymore because the United States has not nominated judges. That's not good for world trade. So we have to come back to normal. We also think, and this has been made very clear by the European Commission, that we want to revive the 2015 international nuclear deal with Tehran and work for including supplementary signatories. And of course, and that is a personal remark I would like to add to this, we have to stabilize the International Criminal Court. And sanctions against judges and prosecutors are not the thing to do. The third element is to set a joint EU-US tech agenda. Now, I do believe that the one who controls the technology world is the one who controls the world. And we should not leave others to overtake us on this. So the best idea is to work together and not fight each other. I think about a convergence on a rule-based tech governance. We had the example of GDPR, which has become the blueprint for the world. Well, we have now the industrial data. We need the free flow of these data and a new privacy shield, which has been eliminated, you know, for very good reasons by the European Court of Justice. So I am pleading for setting a blueprint for the world on the way we utilize data and also on the way we build the artificial intelligence. This has to be built on a global standard, and I call on the United States and Europe to work together on this global standard, because we have to be rule makers and not rule takers. And finally, we have to reaffirm our joint commitment to transatlantic security. And the fact that there is trouble in NATO is very troubling indeed. We shouldn't allow that, because that is not in the advantage of our transatlantic relations. It is not in the advantage of the US. It's not in the advantage of Europe. We have to rebuild security and defense dialogue with a very positive approach, solve problems and not be aggressive. So I also do believe, and I make it very short because you can talk about this for a long time, that the whole discussion about who pays what is not primary. It's much more about commerce and about something else. What is primary is how we are spending and how we do cooperate in research and how are we exercising leadership. Any split in the NATO would be a gift to Putin. So that is the last thing we want. And that is why I do believe that on all these elements, which I separated now, but which in the end are very interlinked, geopolitics, NATO, technology, greening of the world, all these are interlinked. You cannot separate, you have to have a coherent policy. And I would prefer that we could do this coherent policy together in future with our American friends and partner on a mutual understanding. And I can assure you that for achieving this, Luxembourg will be in the driving seat.
Thank you, Mrs. Reding. Ambassador Evans, your keynote remarks, please.
All right. Well, first of all, let me say to everyone, happy holidays. These are difficult times that we're in, but the holidays are actually designed to bring back to the forefront of our thoughts why we have the holidays. And I think it's critically important that at this point in time, for the world, for our countries, for our people that we remind everyone to take a moment and celebrate the holidays for what they are, which are times of goodwill, of love, and hope, because that's the kind of thing that is going to be so critical in 2021 as we try to combat one of the greatest challenges that we have had, if not the greatest challenge since the end of World War II, which is the COVID pandemic. And I'm always fascinated whenever I participate in a forum like this, that there will be a litany of issues talked about, but the elephant in the room is the COVID pandemic, how we survived the COVID pandemic, how we shorten its life, and how we bring back the world, bring back Europe, bring back the United States, bring back everyone else, so that we can share those things which are at the heart of these holidays. I also want to take one personal privilege and wish my good friend Ambassador Strunk a happy birthday. I'm not going to reveal exactly what number that birthday is, because in our phone call earlier today, there was a promise of privilege and confidentiality, even though I haven't received my attorney fee yet. But I do want to wish Ambassador Strunk. I will say to every person on this call, there are very few people in Luxembourg who have been more helpful to the U.S., Luxembourg, to the U.S.-EU relationship than Ambassador Gaston Strunk. And the government of Luxembourg is so fortunate to have him as the U.S. ambassador. And I want to wish him the happy birthday. I also want to say thank you to all of the frontline workers who are hopefully now at the front of the line in getting the vaccine that was produced at warp speed by the United States of America in what can only be called a medical miracle. It does prove what capitalism, what free enterprise, what entrepreneurship, what innovation can do when the handcuffs of regulation, when the restraints are taken off, when the incentives are in place to deal with real problems that are taking real lives and hurting so many people. And so to them who've endured so much, I'm so glad that hopefully the relief is on the way. It will not be fast enough for many, but hopefully it will be fast enough to save the vast majority, and that it will make a difference in the lives of people all around the world. You know, when I became the United States ambassador here, I began my tenure, many like Paul and Gaston and others were present. And I started with this promise that we would focus on that which we have in common, which, without dwelling on those things where we differed. And I promised that during my tenure, we would honor the past and we would look to the future. And that manifested itself in three principal ways. The first way was to honor the past. I was very fortunate to be a part of the presidential delegation for the 75th anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge. An ultimate sacrifice. When we think about the pandemic today, we have no concept of the loss of life. And we were so fortunate that we had heads of state from around Europe, throughout the European Union, come here in Luxembourg to pay tribute to American heroes. 5,000 men, one woman, Nancy Leo, who lay in rest at the Luxembourg American Cemetery, who paid the ultimate price so that Luxembourgers and Belgians and Germans and others could be free today. And so anytime I hear someone talk about the resolve, I think I go to the cemetery and I realize what resolve really is. And I have a full appreciation of it. when I have a bad day, and we all do, I get out, I walk out the door, I say to the driver to take me to the cemetery. I walk around and I look around and I realize what a bad day really is. And so I want to put that in perspective because Luxembourg has been a partner locked in arms in commemorating so many of the different commemorations that we had last year for the 75th. And indeed, this weekend, we will begin the commemorations for the 76th. And I hope that tradition goes on and on. Let me say to my friends in the United States who are watching, you would be amazed because when you ride around Luxembourg, you will see as many American flags as you do Luxembourg flags often. And as a result, it reflects a bond that has been forged over time and continues today, till today. But honoring the past isn't just talking about the victory, it talks about unresolved issues. I was fortunate to also be a member of the 75th, the US delegation to the 75th liberation of Auschwitz. And there are many issues here in Luxembourg that remained unresolved. Dealing with the Holocaust and dealing with the pain and suffering that was incurred. And we are within a breath of an agreement, a framework that will bring closure to many, if not all of those issues. And I'm very proud of that. I'm very hopeful that in the coming days, we'll be announcing a signing ceremony where we bring that to closure. And then we look to space. Now, when I first got here, I went to my first event, which was a space event, and I looked up and there were all of these flags from countries around the world, but there was no American flag. Now imagine that, being in a country where you ride around the countryside and you see American flags everywhere, and you go to the government and you see space where the US landed a man on the moon and there's no American flag. I scratched my head and I immediately began the effort to work on the space initiative. And within a short period of time, working with, at that time, Deputy Prime Minister Eddie Schneider, we came up with the Memorandum of Understanding that created a platform, a foundation between the United States and between Luxembourg on a Memorandum of Understanding. And that Memorandum of Understanding provided a platform to then grow and have many other space initiatives, such that the culmination was that when the United States was prepared to roll out the Artemis Accords program, which would create the foundation and the boundaries for creating a permanent station on the moon and then going on to Mars, among the top 5 countries in the world was the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg. In fact, as it was often said, soon Luxembourg's place in space will be many, many times greater than its geographic footprint here on planet Earth. But I don't want to skip over the issues that Mrs. Reding, who did a fantastic job in outlining a variety of issues that she raised. The truth of the matter is, the world has changed in those 75 years. When we fought World War II, Russia was an ally. No one would suggest that they're allies today, not to the European Union and not to the United States. When we fought World War II, China had to be liberated. No one would suggest that today China needs liberation. Many would suggest there are many who need to be liberated from China. And when I look at the COVID pandemic, and I look at its origination, and I look at its spread, and I look at the reaction, including PPEs and the selling and reselling of staff, I can only wonder what must go through the minds of the leaders of the EU who prior to the pandemic were prepared to literally sign on to the Silk Belt and Road Initiative, Luxembourg being one of them, not recognizing the threats when you could ride down the street and you could see that bank after bank was being purchased by Luxembourg. Now, I could have focused all of my energy on that. Instead, we had a tax treaty that was dealt with dual taxation that had lingered in the United States Senate for 12 years, and we pulled it up and we got it passed bipartisan. And when you look back through our embassy website, when you look back through it, you're going to see that the people that came to the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg during my ambassadorship ranged from cabinet members for President Trump to the leadership of the House, including Speaker Pelosi and the entire leadership, Majority Leader Hoyer, Majority Whip Clyburn, and the leaders of both parties in the Senate. And the reason was because if you focus on the things that you share, like commemorating the sacrifices in World War II, like putting an end to the horrors of the Holocaust, like exploring space together in a collaborative project, wonderful things happened. And so I'll end with the most legendary, according to the media here in Luxembourg, was that in my very first major July 4th event, we were so honored to have Buzz Aldrin, the man who walked, second man to walk on the moon here in Luxembourg, to talk about it. And my favorite part of his story was that he was sure he had visited Luxembourg before. He just didn't realize it at the time because he was standing on the moon. And so I look forward to answering questions. I'm not going to shy away from them, dealing with the issues that are raised. And I thank Mrs. Reding for, first, the content of her communication and her remarks, as well as the challenging issues that she raises to put at the forefront of this discussion. So thank you, Paul.
Thank you, sir. Sir, moving on into the first questions, Mr. Ambassador, you have already touched on the issue of the work of the U.S. Embassy and the impact that that's had on bilateral relations. I did want to ask if you had any further comments you wanted to make on that, and as well to say if you had any thoughts of how you think this might or won't change under a new administration.
Well, the good news is the issues that we focused on are the issues of such bilateral support that I don't think there'll be any change whatsoever. Both parties came to the commemorations, the leadership, both from the cabinet. I think we'll have further before it's over with the leadership of both parties on space, the leadership of both parties on this Holocaust proposal that we're working on, the leadership on I think the vote, and I'll defer to my Deputy Chief of Mission, Casey, to give, but I think the vote on the tax ratification was 98-0. What it took was somebody willing to go to the halls of the Senate and say, Luxembourg is important enough that it needs attention, and this treaty needs to get ratified. And today, or maybe yesterday, I was one of the major banks that invited me in to speak to their board, and the question that was asked me was, what would I think is my greatest contribution? What is your greatest contribution? Is it the Artemis Accords? Is it the Holocaust Agreement? Is it bringing Buzz Aldrin? Is it being at the 75th Liberation from Auschwitz? Is it being at the 75th for the Battle of the Bulge? Is it having a bus stop to our cemetery? And my answer was none of those. I think the single biggest contribution that I have made is to help the leaders in the United States of America in both parties understand Luxembourg exists. Luxembourg is important. Luxembourg is a leader, and Luxembourg can help the entire world solve problems that we never dreamed of. And we've done that by taking the leadership of the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg to Washington, D.C., and introduce them to the very highest levers of power in the White House, in the Pentagon, in the Senate, in the House, and in the U.S. Supreme Court. And we brought all of those same people to Luxembourg so they can see for themselves what a great place Luxembourg is. It culminated with 16 of the most significant U.S. ambassadors coming here in the September summit and meeting here in Luxembourg, not Rome, not London, not Berlin, not Paris. They all came to Luxembourg so that they could see. And I think at the end of the day, as I leave, when I leave in January, everyone should feel good to know that many more in the positions that can make a difference in the future of our world know the importance and know the significant value that the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg offers to not just the United States, but to the world in solving the enormous problems that will face us once we have emerged from the COVID pandemic.
Sure, that's really powerful, and thank you for that. Mrs. Reding, do you have any comment you'd like to make on this subject?
I have so many comments, but I try to be very much to the point. Now, I think the most important I have to say is happy birthday, Ambassador Strong. And I hope that we can, or at least virtually, raise our glass to your health and to your happiness and to everything what you are doing for Luxembourg in the United States. Thank you very much. Now coming back to what the ambassador has said. I have been looking through my files and popped up a picture which was taken exactly 1 year ago, today 1 year ago, when Nancy Pelosi with her delegation from the parliament was visiting for the celebrations of the Battle of the Bulge. It was a great meeting also in the Luxembourgian parliament. Imagine the big American Congress coming to the small Luxembourgian parliament, and we didn't feel that those were big and we were small. We just felt comfortable. We were among friends. And that is exactly what the ambassador has underlined. And I would like to say that stays, despite, as I said in my introduction, who is in power here or there. You cannot undo this historical friendship and this respect. And it will continue also in the future. Now, I have one remark to do on the space question, because our American friends might ask, what the hell does this mean? Small Luxembourg is first on space mining. And Americans say, why don't you take us with you? This has a past. First, Luxembourg was born out of the mining industry and the steel industry. So we know about mining. All right, this has nothing to do with space. But then we got the first non-military satellite being established here in Luxembourg, and still Société Européenne des Satellites is the second largest private satellite company worldwide, if I am not mistaken. So there also what we did as Luxembourgers and what you have to do if you are small and you don't have the power, you have to be a first mover and take risks. So we have done that several times in the history of our country, and that explains what otherwise is unexplainable. So to bring together space and mining was a logical thing, although a crazy one. It was something where you needed to have political courage, and you had to say, well, I'll take the risk, I'll go for it. And I think it's right that our political leaders of whatever party they are, they regularly take these risks in order to go a step further, but they never do it alone. They might be the first movers, but they will always have people and countries and collaborative approaches working. That's the only way to do. But you have to sit around the table. And that was the same also, for instance, today, the euro is the second currency worldwide. Well, it was a Luxembourgish idea to create the euro. It was Pierre Werner who had the idea of building a common currency for the European continent, and he developed it. And there you go. You see, very often it is Luxembourgers who understand what the collectivity has to do and brings them the collectivity to work. That's the strength of Luxembourg. So I am very excited to see the collaboration between the United States and Luxembourg and so many others continuing on the space development, because there is a real future in that, and creating also the basis and the rules in how to proceed with this new frontier will be of utmost importance. I suppose, Paul Schonenberg, we are going to come back to China, so I'm not touching it now. Just one word about the vaccine and about the pandemic. I didn't speak about it because I have been sitting in the parliament during the whole day voting on the laws to combat the pandemic. I cannot hear it anymore, but Pfizer-BioNTech, the first vaccine to be administered. BioNTech is a German company which is led by scientists from Turkish origin. A story of success, of migration and integration, and of European research, working together with a big company, Pfizer. So you see, it is a success story. It's not an American miracle. It is a European research miracle, which has been brought to explosion worldwide because of collaboration. And that is exactly what I wanted to say in my whole developments which I have made. It's not America first, not Europe first, not Luxembourg first, but it is all together that we can win and have a success story. So I'm very happy that this European American vaccine will be one of the vaccines which will be there to solve the problem. And I would, in this moment, speak again about politics, because we are rich countries. We will manage this crisis. We might need a little more time, most of all those who have not started early enough in order to take the right measures. And we might have a third wave coming also. I speak globally. But we can fight it because we have the means to fight it. There are parts of the world where they don't have the means to fight it. And I'm speaking now about Africa, mainly. And I'm speaking about the global response to give also a part of those vaccines to those people who do not have the possibility to have medical help. And the COVAX facility, which has been created by the European Union, and where we want to give vaccines to more than 180 participating countries, I would hope that very, very soon America would join this endeavor. So it is about us, it is about the others, but it is also about solidarity.
I'm very heartened to hear both of you speaking about the durability of the relationship and the partnership between between in a transatlantic sense, between the two continents. And Mrs. Reding, in your opening remarks, you talked a bit about geopolitics, and you have just said that you'd like to talk a little bit more about the power games between the US and the EU and China. And now what I think would be a good time to ask for a little bit, to give you an opportunity to speak a little bit more about that, and then Ambassador Evans to respond.
Well, it is an evidence. The ambassador has spoken about old times, where the young generation sees those old times in history books, hopefully. And that is why I would like to thank the ambassador also for his engagement in the Holocaust proposal, because really we have to teach history to the younger generation. But the young generation mostly thinks about their future life. And that's not the past, but that's the future. And so the power game, which is going on in this moment, is a power game of technology. The one who wins a power game of technology will win the power in the world. And we see the development which is taking place in China mainly, but also in Asia. And we will have those, already have those three poles of technological development, of technological power, of inventiveness, of bringing things forward, coming with new technologies, developing AI. And that is why I said it is high time that America and Europe stop to fight each other. We will disagree on the one or the other topic, and we'll continue to disagree. But we should sit together and build a common understanding on the digital world we are going to go into. Not later than today, the European Commission has presented its Digital Service Act, which is of utmost importance for the future development on how we tackle technology, common rules, ex-ante obligations, better oversight, speedy enforcement, deterrent sanctions, and for me that is the most important, rules-based action. But who creates the rules? And there I really would say the hand which has been reached out by Europe saying, please, America, let's create those rules together. Because if the two major continents of technology today, which are still America and the European Union, if we join forces, then we will make the rules of the future. And it will be rules based on our values. And these values are common. So if something comes out of the discussion we have today, it would be that really both continents would start to build on these value-based rules and to develop the standards for the future. If we have done that, then any threat which could come from China will be lessened.
Mr. Ambassador?
Well, let me start with this. If you're dependent upon innovation and technology and research, it depends on the ability to protect your know-how, your intellectual property. There is no greater theft occurring today than the Chinese stealing everyone else, including Germany, including Luxembourg, including the United States, their technology. And so when I hear this, I think it was a defense of China, but I wasn't exactly sure. And I realized that the single greatest technological advancement by China today is the ability to copy and take intellectual property that's developed by other countries. I have to say that that's a bit naive. The fact of the matter is that we know that China's principle, and we have no enforcement mechanism because we can't get out of the EU even a condemnation of the theft of intellectual property. And so the idea that somehow that works together. I don't know. I have to say, from the real world that I sit in, where I'm meeting with American companies and I'm talking to them about investing and being a part of Luxembourg, the first question they have is, what protection do we have? Because if the Chinese own 1% of our company, if they have one seat on the board, if they have one officer in the corporation, then China has all of our technology, no matter how innovative it is. And so, to me, that's a real challenge that has to exist, is a fundamental recognition of the threat that China poses, a far greater threat than that posed by Russia to Luxembourg. I don't think Luxembourg should lose any sleep tonight that Russian tanks are going to roll over the border. I think Luxembourgers, every company in Luxembourg, especially those in financial transactions, should worry tonight about malware, about theft of intellectual property, and about losing that which they've worked so hard for. And let me circle it all the way back, because I agree that collaboration was the key to the warp speed success. But also let me point you to something that many would be familiar with, which was the story of the Good Samaritan. Now, the Good Samaritan comes along and he helps. But my question to you is, which came first? Money in his pocket to be able to help, or the help that he gave? And what the United States did was to allocate early enormous resources to every one of these companies, resources that no one else did, and by doses that have yet to be produced, that were completely hypothetical, that are now being administered. It is reminiscent of the same problem, and I'm sure that we'll talk about it in a moment, of NATO, where it falls on the United States to bear the financial burden for defending the entire world. In fact, I posed this question last week. When the Chinese move on Hong Kong, which European country is going to step up? When the Chinese take on Taiwan, which European country is going to step up? And the answer that I got from Europeans was that's what the US is for. That's the central key of developing for the new century, for the new millennia, an understanding that this is a shared responsibility that everyone should undertake collectively and jointly. Not one where it's just one country that has to bear the burden for everyone else. And so when you sat in the Chamber of Deputies today, did you debate when the first vaccine would be administered in Luxembourg? No. Why not? That's the question.
Well, I think that actually.
Yeah, I have a lot to say on that, but I try to go to the point, not to mix. I will not speak about NATO in this moment, but about the first vaccine. You know that we have the European Medicine Agency, which makes the analysis for the security of the vaccines, all vaccines of whatever origin they are, American, European, whatever. And when they decide that and they have to decide quickly because normally a vaccine takes years before it is said apt to go to the market. They will need to decide very quickly. They will decide on the German-American vaccine on the 21st of December. And Luxembourg is ready. The moment on we have the go of the EMA we have everything established to go for vaccinations, but we wait for the security of the vaccines and not for being first, because for us, our people and their security and their health is first. Having said that, that was not the subject. Let's come back to China. The ambassador hinted in his, and then he said something else, but he hinted that I was in defense of China. No, ambassador. I'm in defense of Europe, very clearly in defense of Europe. And we know that there is a very big problem with intellectual property. We know that in the past, China was a copy and paste and take system. China has been developed, and we have to be conscious about this. We have developed into a continent which is developing its own technologies, not only copying and pasting. But when it is copying and pasting, we have to have defense mechanisms. And that's exactly why the European Commission has developed the investment protection, where we can, on strategic investments of third countries, analyze where these companies which want to invest have been financed with. If there is a big part of state aid, what laws they have to obey. If they will be under European legislation or if they will be under foreign legislation. So it is a very complicated dossier, but I am very sure you understand that it is not by building walls that we can get the Chinese to be less brilliant in their technological development. We have to be brilliant by ourselves. And we have to collaborate more on research. When I was a commissioner, I started to have the first technological platforms for research, where the collaboration between companies and universities, but also between Europeans and Americans was possible in order to have this advancement. So yes, we have to have our defense system, and it has to be an efficient one. Now, the threats, the geopolitical threat. I have very well heard what you said about Hong Kong and about Taiwan, and I couldn't agree more. Very dangerous. Hong Kong has been taken. It was evident that the agreement with the Brits couldn't keep forever. Taiwan is under threat. And the development in the South China Sea are extraordinarily worrying, not only for Taiwan, but also for the countries around. That's why also I suppose that one day the Americans will come back to make agreements with Asian countries so that the connections are also between America and Asian countries, Europe and Asian countries, and that Asian countries are not under the full dominance of China. So it is not a simplistic way of looking at things. You have to have very different elements to be looked at and to be you have to be concerned about those, and you have to build your defense. But it is not only a reactive way. You have also to be proactive, and you have to be better. Where can we be better? In having a joint defense capability on the digital development. And that is what America and Europe has to do in the future, much, much more intense than now. President von der Leyen has called this last week that the new administration should as quickly as possible sit together with the European Commission in order to have a common deal on how to handle AI. You see, that has to do with all the technological development, also the one in China. So we need together to build our defense capability and to build also our technological advancement.
Well, if I could just say, it's difficult for me as an American, as a U.S. ambassador, to accept that Europe is prepared to take on China when most of the European countries, including Luxembourg, have signed the Belt Road Initiative, have refused and blocked sanctions to protect intellectual property. And the answer is we need to work harder, even though it will take longer for that to happen. And the question that I can't shake, to be fair, is even though I will start with Great Britain was the first country to administer a vaccine, that between now and December 21st, when Luxembourg will be prepared to begin vaccines, my question is how many Luxembourgers will die? And so the same question is the question that we had to answer in the United States. And so having made the commitment that we made, we have decided and we are working hard to administer as many frontline workers and researchers so that even more around the world can get the benefit of the technology, which inevitably will be stolen by the Chinese over tacit protests from the EU, with no enforceable agreements, having signed a Belt Road Initiative to cooperate with the Chinese, while Luxembourgers die every day.
Well, I do not understand very well what the belt has to do with the pandemic, but nevertheless, I just say, Ambassador, from all my heart, I hope that you can stop the terrible things which are going on in the United States, and that it will not be too late for other hundreds and thousands of citizens which will die. Because we have seen that the countries who did not protect themselves enough, they run into very big trouble. And I do not want to be polemic tonight. I could, but I will not. So let's stop with this and hope that we can get out of this, and hope that we will have also the force to help those, for instance, the Africans who cannot get the vaccine. And we have a responsibility, you and we, to help also those and not only our people. Because the vaccines, those which we are going to administer, will be the ones developed in Europe and in the United States. So hope the best for our people and make the most of them survive.
I think it's important we switch in a little bit of a different direction. And since a strong part of, we're here to talk about cooperation between Luxembourg and the US, and we're doing this within the context of the American Chamber of Commerce. So I would like to go back to a little bit, to take a pause and go back to some economic issues. And Mr. Ambassador, if I could ask you, when a US firm comes to you and talks about opening offices in Europe and considering the possibility of considering Luxembourg as a location where they would set up a European operating location or a headquarters, if you don't mind my asking, what kind of advice do you think is appropriate to give them to help them make their decision?
Well, as you know, U.S. Secretary of Commerce Wilbur Ross came over to sign the Memorandum of Understanding, and then we met with various business leaders and community leaders and government leaders. And because Luxembourg's regulatory infrastructure and because of its economic policies, we began the process then in that very first year to give the advice that if the plan was to locate in Europe, that you should locate in Luxembourg. that advice continues today. We do that routinely because of the relationship between the two. I will say that the number one pushback that I get from American entrepreneurs is, how do we protect our intellectual property? How do we protect our investment? How do we do that once Luxembourg made the decision to sign the Belt Road Initiative? And I never hear anyone defend that. I never hear anyone repudiate it. I never hear anyone look or take action. And yet every day it seems as though we see another Chinese bank either moving into the country or buying. For example, the Bank of Luxembourg was bought by the Chinese. The bank, the largest bank in the country, along with 8 other Chinese banks. They take that money and they go buy a small interest in a space company, in a manufacturing company. And with that small interest, gain access to valuable intellectual property. And then they copy the intellectual property and use it to create, and we know example after example of where they create competitors, which then put the Luxembourg company out of business. So I think until this problem is solved, and it's not, I want to be fair to Mrs. Reding, it is not a Luxembourg problem.
That is exactly what I wanted to ask you, yes.
It is a European problem.
Yes, okay. Yeah, because I wanted to ask you actually, what is the difference between Luxembourg and France and Luxembourg and Germany?
None.
So it is not a Luxembourgian problem, it is a European problem. And that brings me exactly to my starting point. Luxembourg is not an island. Luxembourg is part of the European Union, and Luxembourg has to help the European Union and be the voice in order the European Union to take the measures to defend itself. For instance, as I told you, the investment protection rules which have been issued, and the wake-up call for this was not in Luxembourg. The wake-up call of this was when the Chinese bought the KUKA company in Germany. Robotic company. The Germans started really to reflect on what that could mean for the development of robotics in Germany. Because you know also of the very strong power of manufacturing in Germany, and a lot of this has to do with automation and with robotics. So the wake-up call came through this, but it was a wake-up call not only for Germany, it was a wake-up call for the whole European Union, because it doesn't make sense if one country makes a rule and in another country the rule doesn't exist. So we have to work on this kind of problems in a European way and get it tackled by the European Commission with the agreement of the European states and of the European Parliament.
But Mrs. Reding, that's not true. And I'm going to give you the most direct example. Luxembourg adopted the US regulatory infrastructure for the ownership of mined space materials. They broke with the EU, they broke with ESA, and they adopted the US model. And it's the reason why so many space companies come to Luxembourg. It's the reason why we direct companies to Luxembourg, is because we know that unlike the rest of the European Union, Luxembourg went its own way. And so when I hear, oh no, we can't do it on our own, I know that not only can Luxembourg do it on its own, it has done it on its own.
You know, we have a Luxembourgian saying, "C'est rode les foules, red lion take them." And it reminds me of this when I hear you speak. But I cannot imagine that Luxembourg broke with ESA, because Luxembourg has a very strong collaboration with ESA. And there have been new collaboration systems built up between Luxembourg and the European Space Agency. So that Luxembourg broke with the European Space Agency, no, Ambassador. I am not a specialist in these kinds of things, but this I cannot believe. It doesn't make sense.
Well, just that's easily verifiable, but to see that Luxembourg decided, for those who are not space gurus, the essential difference is this: under the Luxembourg rules and the U.S. rules, it's treated like fisheries. So if a ship launches out into the ocean, like a ship launches out into space, and the ship incurs all the cost and all the expense and all the risk, and it catches fish, tuna, and brings back, it owns the tuna, it can sell the tuna, and it can keep the profits of the tuna. That is the Luxembourg model. That is the US model. The European model is, if you catch the fish, you have to share the fish, even though you bore all the expense and all the risk. And that is why Deputy Prime Minister Eddie Schneider, as well as his predecessors, made the decision that if space mining, because they understood that if the result was you go mine resources to make steel, which is what this was really about, making steel, that you should be able to take what you've mined, own it, and make it into steel. And other countries reached a completely different issue on the space component. And that's why you have other European countries who've adopted the Moon Treaty. You have other countries who've adopted other rules, but Luxembourg has consistently followed the path that it's had since its very beginning. And that's why it became the country that if you look per capita, Luxembourg has more space companies than almost any country in the world other than the United States. The same is true with regard to financial transactions. You probably know this. Since Brexit, 60 of the largest financial institutions in the world have moved from London to Luxembourg City. Now, why didn't they move to Paris? Why didn't they move to Berlin? Why didn't they move to any of these other bigger financial capitals? Rome. You know why? Because Luxembourg broke with the EU, adopted a different set of rules when it relates to financial transactions, which has now created 5 trillion, second only to the US, and investment funds held. And so I appreciate the defense of the EU. I just know that in the reality of the economics and of space, it's a different ballgame.
Well, in questions of financial regulation, Luxembourg certainly didn't break with the EU, because Luxembourg is in accordance with the European financial regulations. But let us come back to space mining. Am I mistaken or not that the first worldwide law made on space mining was a Luxembourgian law?
No, I totally agree with you. And yes. Then it was the US that developed.
Yeah, remember, but you see, that's interesting.
We were the ones who went to the moon and actually got rocks. And do you know what we did last week?
You joined Luxembourg. All right.
No. We took the US law and the Luxembourg law, and we signed a contract between NASA and iSpace, a Luxembourg country, for the purchase of rocks retrieved by iSpace under Luxembourg law, because it couldn't exist in other countries. So when I hear you say, oh no, we can't do that because of the EU, And I know that I just attended one of the most widely covered space events on the planet last week because of the uniqueness that Luxembourg has taken. And that is why when I came here, I said, let's focus on the issues we have in common. One of the issues we have in common is space. And the net effect of that is to create already 3.5% of your GDP expected to grow at a rapid rate consistent with your long-term diversification plan.
I applaud with both hands. And I
Let's
think
leave it-
it's absolutely wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. But remember, when I made my analysis of why Luxembourg had come to space mining, I started with the experience of mining. I started with the experience of the first non-military satellites worldwide in Luxembourg. So what Luxembourg has, and that is important for our American friends who are listening to us, is Luxembourg is always trying to find a niche where it can jump in and develop itself, not against somebody, but for itself, and afterwards having others coming to join it. So it is not Luxembourg against somebody else. It's Luxembourg utilizing the first mover and the first idea and the risk-taking models in order to go ahead, and influencing after that the decision-making at the European level. So that is the Luxembourgian way of behaving since ages. And the reason why Luxembourg has become one of the richest countries in the world is not because our people are more intelligent or because we have so many wealth and riches in Luxembourg, but simply because we are so small. And because we cannot go around like beggars, we have to have first movers and persuade others to come with us. And you gave the perfect example how Luxembourg is succeeding in doing this.
Okay, I think we have, all of us collectively, taken a little bit more time than we have than we had allocated, and I think we're starting to lose a few of our guests. This has been a very good conversation and a very good exchange, which I appreciate. I think what we should perhaps do is do a little bit of a switch around, and I had wanted to give the opportunity to Casey Mace to go ahead and give a little bit of a few keynote remarks, and I would ask him if he would do that now, and then we will ask or give the possibility for one more question for Mrs. Reding and for Ambassador Evans, and then we will call it to a close. So Casey, could I ask you if you would go ahead and say a few remarks now?
Hi, thanks, Paul, and hi, everyone. As Paul mentioned and Ambassador Evans mentioned, I'm the Deputy Chief of Mission at the Embassy. I've been here for more than 2 years, helping Ambassador Evans achieve all that he listed for the U.S.-Luxembourg relationship, and it has been a great more than 2 years for this relationship, for this love story that Mrs. Reding was talking about, and it's been great and fun to be part of. I will stay behind when Ambassador Evans leaves with a great team at the embassy. And I just wanted to share with all of you listening in that the team at the embassy remains committed and steadfast in strengthening the relationship. We have great hope still for this relationship. There's a lot that we can still harness or harvest from the achievements over the last 2 years, especially in the space sector, and in the finance sector with all of the great partnerships we have with the American business community. We've done quite a bit also in our defense sector in strengthening our relationship on the defense side as NATO allies. The alliance will remain more important than ever going forward, and making sure that the alliance is postured for the challenges that we've already discussed today, is resourced to confront those challenges, will be important for the years to come. And we've done great work in that space, and we'll continue to do good work in that space. look forward to working with Ambassador Strunk, who Ambassador Evans mentioned has been a great friend to the relation for the United States, and believe that in partnership with him, in partnership with the Chamber of Deputies, with the government of Luxembourg, with the Chamber of Commerce, with all of the members of the business community on both sides of the Atlantic, that this relationship will just go from strength to strength. And as the new administration comes in and defines some of its own priorities, we'll work to translate those into real gains for Luxembourg and the United States. So that's all I wanted to say. I thank you for the opportunity, and thanks to Ambassador Evans, Ambassador Strunk, Paul, and others for all of the work that we've all done to strengthen this relationship.
Thank you, Casey. In listening to the conversations that we have had tonight, I'm reminded a little bit that it takes people who are very close to have the intimacy of the discussions and the exchanges and the frank discourse that we're having. You don't have that with people that you don't know and like. You have that with people that you feel close to. And because of that, you feel the freedom to have these kinds of conversations. So I thank Ambassador Evans, and I thank Mrs. Reding for going ahead and engaging in the conversation we've had, but we have run over on time. So what I think I have to do is I have to suggest, even though we could be doing this for another half a day or another day, I'm sure, I have to say, even though there are other questions left to answer, we have had a very good and a very rich exchange. And I would like to bring it back to inviting Mrs. Reding to go ahead and make some closing remarks, and then give Ambassador Evans the opportunity to do the same. And then we will close this down shortly after that for the evening. So Mrs. Reding, if I could give you the opportunity to add on what you have already said and make some closing remarks. I wish we had another 4 hours, but a lot more time, because I've thoroughly enjoyed the richness of the conversation, but we just don't have the time. So if I could ask you for some closing remarks, and then Ambassador Evans the same. I thank you both sincerely for, with your strong intellects, you have given us a wonderful evening tonight, both of you. Madam Reding.
Well, thank you for organizing this wonderful dialogue. And I don't want to make a closing remark because this is an open story. Yes. This has just started now on all the new elements we have to build on in the future. And I have one question for the ambassador. Ambassador, you have been a wonderful representative of American interests in Luxembourg. Now when you go back to America, will you become some kind of honorary, voluntary ambassador for Luxembourgian interest in the United States?
Well, let me say this. I've already been accused of having switched colors or switched jerseys, as we would say in the U.S., because I have forced the issue in Washington that Luxembourg is the place. It's the place for investment for the future. And I say that because we have so much in common. Ms. Reding, you're a great example of the sharpness and the intellect of the average Luxembourger, often fluent in 4 languages and 3 languages, not all the time, but more, as you pointed out, Luxembourg is a country willing to take risk. So if you have entrepreneurship, you have intellect, and you're willing to take risk, you have to be from one of 2 places, the United States of America or Luxembourg. And so for the fact of the matter is, for every American company that's on our call tonight, let me say, there is no better country in the world, not just Europe, that if you're thinking of expanding your operations to do so, than to come to the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg and count on reliability and dependability and accessibility to government leaders to have a workforce that is incomparable in terms of intellect, commitment, work, drive, fluency in languages, everything that you could possibly imagine is right here in this small country projecting an enormous footprint into space. And for those who are on the call from Luxembourg, let me compliment you. You have a great country. And the number one thing that I get accused of when I go to Washington, D.C. is that I've become Luxembourger. And I never deny it. I'm the biggest fan in the world. I will do everything I can when I return to help every one of the CEOs and CFOs and small companies and big companies and municipalities and mayors. I want everyone to expand their operations, be as all they can be, and join together and know that you have something special. And for the longest time, it was one of the best kept secrets in the world. And then I came along and I decided to tell everybody I could find what a wonderful place Luxembourg is. And Paul, thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you, sir. We are joined by, as I said, quite a few colleagues and friends from the United States, and I think that makes the richness of this event. And that's only possible because of our long and good cooperation with LACC NYC. And Nicholas, I believe, who is the head of the Elvinger and Haas office in New York City. So a Luxembourger in New York. I think it's appropriate that we ask you if you would give a few words of greetings on behalf of our colleagues and friends in New York City and the United States. Nicholas?
Thank you very much, Paul. First of all, I'd like to thank the wonderful speakers, Madam Reding and Ambassador Evans, for the thought-provoking discussion tonight. I thoroughly enjoyed the discussion. I thought it was extremely interesting to see where we have agreements, where there are maybe also areas for improvement. And as for ourselves, the Luxembourg American Chamber of Commerce here in New York, we see ourselves as a bridge between both countries. We help companies going one way or the other. And obviously, we are thrilled to take Ambassador Evans up on his offer to become the promoter here of Luxembourg interest in the United States. So we'll certainly reach out when you'll have had a chance to relocate. I'd also like to thank Delano News for their support in organizing the event, Paul, you personally, but also the entire AMCHAM team in Luxembourg for their wonderful cooperation, and the US Embassy for their help in setting up this event. And you've mentioned Ambassador Strong in your respective remarks. I'd like to wish him also all the very best for his birthday. We go back a very long time together since we were actually based in the same countries before. Finally, allow me to also repeat, Paul, what you mentioned and what Ambassador Evans mentioned. I'd like to wish everybody here on this call a very happy Hanukkah or Christmas or any other celebration, year-end celebration that you may be celebrating, and a very safe and well 2021.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the privilege to go ahead and call this to a close. I have nothing but the deepest respect for Madam Reding and, of course, for Ambassador Evans. And I'm deeply honored that both of you would choose to spend a little bit of time with us today and a little bit take the gloves off and go ahead and have such a rich conversation between the two of you, which I believe has been very educational for all of our audience. It's obvious we have a strong and powerful relationship together that is mutually beneficial to both groups and to those constituencies that are important to us. And we should be thankful for that. And by the same token, it's equally obvious that there are challenges, and we all need to be vigilant, and we all need to work hard moving forward for the future to go ahead and make things even better. And when we identify problems, to work together in partnership to go ahead and resolve them. I am confident that we have the strength and the will to be able to do that. And Having said all of that, I can only add to what others have said. At this time of year, I think it's time to think of families and friends, to think good thoughts about building a better world. And it's my pleasure to wish each and every one of you a very warm Merry Christmas, a Happy Hanukkah, and for a new year filled with joy, happiness, success for those, for your families, for your friends, for those you love. Thank you for joining us tonight. And if I may, if you'll forgive me for saying, God bless each and every one of you. God bless America. God bless Luxembourg. Thank you very much and good night.
Good.
Thank you, Paul, and everyone. It's appreciated.
Thank you, Tony.